What?
Hello everyone, my name is Sam Sandweiss.
And my name is Max Cohen, and this is Outlook, a game where we put the power of perspective into the player's hand.
So before we jump into our mechanics and our narrative, we wanted to just kind of introduce this concept to you. It's called Alice in Wonderland syndrome. It's a unique neurological condition in which people who suffer from it experience very bizarre alterations in size of objects, sense, time, touch. It's a very bizarre and minor but unique neurological disease that's kind of rare but interesting. And with that in mind, we kind of wanted to apply that to a game.
So, what is Outlook? It's a first... I'm not going to use the mic.
Go for it.
What is Outlook? It's a first-person puzzle strategy game where we're going to create optical illusions that allow the players to manipulate and solve these puzzles. Through doing this, we want the players to solve them from a different perspective, both figuratively and literally. So
now we're going to go ahead and jump into a technical demo we have. This is currently an intermediate game that is being made by Max and Ben Skaggs, who's in the back. So they've been spending a lot of time on this, so we're going to show you kind of their hard work. Now, this isn't a comprehensive review of all the mechanics we want to put in this game. There are some things in this game we may not use, and there are some things that we have yet to implement, but we want to give you a basic demo of kind of what we're looking at.
Alright, so let's take it away.
Go ahead. So, the main core mechanic, as you may be familiar with, is this concept of being fixed in manipulated perspective. We can move objects around the environment, and they will change size, but at first it's not going to look like that. It's going to appear as if they're in the same size based on where your perspective is, but when you release them, they're going to change. This, first of all, kind of suits itself as a scaling mechanic, allowing things to get larger and smaller, but it does it itself in like a unique manner. You can make things really big and really small based on where you position them in the world, and it can provide some really unique opportunities for level design. Now, not all objects are going to be scalable. We're going to have some objects that don't necessarily scale, but can be manipulated around in the same way, which kind of gives a demonstration of how this game is calculating the scaling to begin with. So this will be used in conjunction to provide unique and interesting puzzles for our players. So, with that in mind, this is not the only thing we have planned. We also want to, work with objects that scale, not scale, and use these other than just making them bigger and smaller, which is something we're going to kind of talk about with briefly once we get through this demo. There's one other level I want to show you, which is where objects can, maybe start out with being able to be scaled, but they can only be scaled once. And so, this is an example of that, where we'll scale this up once, and you'll notice it'll change colors. And now this can only be moved around. It cannot be scaled.
So unfortunately, I screwed it up. So what do I have to do? I have to restart the level and just figure out what I did wrong and learn from my mistakes.
Exactly.
Did it again.
So yeah, it's a rudimentary example of what we'd like to accomplish, but you can see how it can provide a lot of unique different challenges. There's many different ways to solve these puzzles, and that's what excites us about it. All right, go ahead and back out.
The last one?
No, that's fine. I want to keep
right.
it moving.
Keep it moving.
So yeah.
Alright.
So yeah, another thing we wanted to talk about was specifically just optical illusions, and unfortunately, Google doesn't do a great job with GIFs. So we want to be able to, the best way to describe this is, take your thumb and index finger and kind of try and pinch my head. Everyone over, look, you can look at this too. Actually, you go ahead and look at that. But you can pinch. It's that concept of kind of fixed perspective. You've seen it with trick photography, other things like that. And we want to really experiment with that in our game. I.e., we maybe want to get a set of gears to start moving, but in order to do that, we have to stand just in the right place and position our objects so that way the gears start moving, the machine turns on, and we can open a door and proceed to the next level. But if you take 2 steps to the right, it's just an optical illusion. It's flat, and you can't interact with it.
Oh, you made this super big. There we go. Alright, so what's the story behind Outlook? What's the narrative driving it? Well, Outlook follows our main character named Rose. She has Alice in Wonderland syndrome and a few other mental illnesses, and she's a patient here at Meadow Hills Institute. Now, while there, she's under the supervision of 3 doctors. Now, the story is actually quite personal to me. We kind of came up with it together, but there's a little personal touch. Now, I don't have Alice in Wonderland syndrome, but I am dyslexic, and I always thought what if I could take something labeled as a disability and turn it into a superpower? And that's exactly what we want to do with Rose. Through some fringe science with these 3 doctors, we want her to be able to take this disability that drives her nuts and turn it into a superpower where she can navigate the halls of Meadow Hills like no one's ever done before.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the environment we have. Want to go ahead and go to the next slide? Cool. So Meadow Hills Institute was a very large research institute and mental facility in the 40s and 50s, and had great resources and materials and access for all of their doctors. But then over time, it kind of become less and less popular. Keep going through, and it kind of got this kind of abandoned, spooky feel. But it's still being used, and there's this huge labyrinth of levels and labyrinth of empty labs and spaces that'll be a great environment for our player. And we wanted to further explore this too, specifically between the 3 doctors. Each doctor has its own specialty: genetics, neuropharmacology, and I'm spacing on the last, I think, psychology, and they all deal with different mechanics that we'd like to further implement that would create each section of our game and make it kind of unique. With that said, we're going to talk a little bit about challenges.
All right, so of course this is a game, and most of us here tried to make a game or made a game already, and there's always roadblocks. So start off, design roadblocks. While creating that tech demo you saw, I learned a very, very important lesson, that the simpler the level for the puzzle game, the more fun and the more you can express with a very complicated mechanic. Now, unfortunately, this mechanic is hard to use. Like, perspective isn't easy to understand for the common person, and there is a learning curve. And we want to kind of make it smoother, like Portal does for their puzzles. So we have a plan to use like a scroll wheel versus just forcing the perspective.
And the next thing we wanted to kind of talk about is that obviously we're inspired by a lot of games that are out now or still currently in development. That's very clear. And we want to keep the policy of iteration off inspiration. We've seen a lot of things that inspired us, and yes, currently at a certain state you can make an argument that some things are similar, but our goal and our design challenge to set ahead of us is what we want to do is move forward and make it different. And that's kind of one of the main reasons why we're going for a game that's going to have a slightly heavier narrative. We want to focus on the optical illusions, the forced perspective, fixed perspective, stuff like that, and move away just from the base mechanic. So, also talk briefly about scope. We'd like to have 3 acts, 1 for each doctor that we've created. We'd like to have at least 1 act finished for fall demo day, and then the final 2 acts finished for spring demo day. But with that said, each act is going to be compartmentalized, and we think that we know that we will be able to finish this game with 1 act or 3 acts, and we'll be able to adjust the narrative and the mechanics with that in mind. We're going to be using Unity for this project, and we are going to be developing for the PC specifically.
Just reason being behind this, I think originally in our written pitch we said we were interested in exploring Unreal, but with our team experience, we think Unity is a better choice, and we still think we can get a great art from the engine.
There are a lot of technical challenges, and we want to make sure our prototype is in Unity, so we want to make sure that we're being reasonable with that. So here's some of our inspirations.
So as you can see, 2 of these games are actually produced by one person, Kim Swift, or designed. But we really like the way Portal, the difficulty ramp in Portal. We really liked how Quantum Conundrum played with time and other real-world things we deal with every day, but let the player control them. Antechamber was a great example of non-Euclidean geometry we'd like to explore for one of the acts in our game, just kind of to bend the player's mind and to understand what's going on in a crazy sense, because the whole game is supposed to be crazy. And of course, what's the term for the awkward thing in the room? But Pillow Castle, I'm sure a lot of people have seen it. It's quite similar to the tech demo, but we definitely don't want to go in the same direction as them.
This is our current team.
We are.
Just to say, Max is the lead director. I'll be lead game design. And we have a lead producer and a lead engineer, along with some other people.
Who unfortunately could not make it today.
Somehow they scheduled class at 5 p.m. on a Friday. I haven't figured that one out yet.
All right, so that's pretty much it. We have 30 seconds left.
And that is Outlook.
Q&A.